Welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. Israel is planning swift retaliation for Iran's missile strike. The plan could include attacking Iran's nuclear facilities, which President Biden says he will not support.
Meanwhile, Israeli ground forces fighting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon suffered their first combat losses. Paul Strand has more from Jerusalem.
Israeli officials pledged a swift retaliation for Iran's missile attack on Tuesday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has met with top military and civilian leaders to mull over options. Targets could include Iran's oil rigs or even its nuclear facilities as it moves closer to producing nuclear weapons. President Biden was asked if he'd support strikes against those nuclear facilities.
The answer is no. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do.
Biden said Israel must respond proportionally. After the United Nations Secretary General failed to immediately and specifically condemn Iran for its attack, Israel's foreign minister accused Antonio Guterres of being deeply anti-Israel. Katz declared the UN chief persona non grata in Israel and banned him from entering the country. Wednesday, after Katz's comments, Guterres made this statement.
I again strongly condemn yesterday's massive missile attack by Iran on Israel.
At that same Security Council meeting, Iran's ambassador declared Tuesday's missile attack on Israel a necessary and proportionate response to what he called Israel's continued terrorist aggressive acts. Those include wiping out most of the top leaders of Iran's proxy army, Hezbollah, booby-trapping thousands of Hezbollah's beepers and walkie-talkies to explode, and IDF ground troops invading southern Lebanon to clear out the terror group. 8 of those troops died in skirmishes with Hezbollah fighters this week, their bodies evacuated soon after. But the mission goes on, searching out and destroying terrorist tunnels, infrastructure, and weapons hidden all over southern Lebanon. Iran's president warned that if Israel escalates its war against Hezbollah or comes after Iran itself, they will hit back much harder. Israel's ambassador to the UN says Iran's massive attack already proves its genocidal aims.
This was not just an escalation. It was a direct assault on our very existence.
Almost 10 million Israelis took to shelters as the missiles hurled toward their nation, but for many, faith conquered fear.
We were not afraid. There's someone from above that is watching over us. God is guarding the people of Israel. We have nothing to fear.
Israelis are now observing the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. The high holidays are always a time of heightened alert, even more so in this time of war. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, today is Rosh Hashanah, and I want to take a moment and just reflect where we are in history. You look at the current conflict, and its truth has been stood on its head, where you have in the hallways of the UN, in the main Security Council, some kind of claim that Israel is committing terror attacks. And it just seems to be absolutely horrific to me that that would even be entertained at that level. This all started on October 7th. It all started with Hamas with a brutal attack on civilians in Israel. Then you add to it Hezbollah raining rockets down on soccer fields for children, and you go, who's to blame here? Israel is not to blame. They are responding to attacks on their sovereign territory. As a nation recognized by the UN, they have every right to defend themselves. And the Jewish people, going back to the San Remo resolution of 1924, you look back at this history and you go, well, they have a right of self-determination. And they have that in their ancestral homeland, which is Israel. We need to stand with Israel. Now, I've been asked, are we in the end times? And my answer is, we're getting closer. This is yet another birth pang. And in that birth pang, we need to look to the Bible. What is our source of inspiration? What is our source of comfort in these dire days as ballistic missiles are being targeted at Israel, as terrorism is being targeted at Israel? Well, here's this week's Torah portion. It's the end of the Torah cycle because it's Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. So this Saturday, this is the passage that's going to be read in every synagogue around the world. And it's the Song of Moses. And it concludes with this one verse. As Christians, we need to recognize this song was absolutely instrumental and foremost in the minds of the disciples and the apostles, those who wrote the New Testament. The Apostle Paul quoted this song several times in the book of Acts and especially in the book of Romans. But here's the last verse. In this, the rabbinical teaching needs to echo throughout Christians around the world today, because the rabbis say the Song of Moses is a history of humanity, that when you read that psalm, you see the entire history laid out by Moses, the prophet of God. Here is how he concludes it. It's from Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 43. Rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and render vengeance to his adversaries. He will provide atonement for his land and his people. It's this verse that caused the Apostle Paul to say, and all Israel will be saved. In these trying times, let's keep this in mind. Israel will be saved, and it will be saved because Israel is the apple of God's eye.